towards the end of that year, I got a job. I got a real person job in an apartment, and I went and had my real job, which was a really good experience. It was doing social media and public relations for Southeast Montana tourism and Visit Billings. So where I'm from, I moved back to my hometown of Billings, and I was basically doing tourism promotion, social media, all that kind of stuff I was really good at. And I liked the job. I liked who I worked with. It was something I was really good at. But I was stuck in a closet there. I shared an office that was literally a closet converted into an office. And I shared it with my marketing director. And I had no windows. And I was just like, you took a person who just spent the last year spending more time outside than inside, and you locked them away in a place that has no windows. After about a year and a half of doing that, I couldn't do it anymore. I really couldn't. I was starting to go crazy. It was starting to really affect my mood, and my whole personality was changing. I could easily see how people could get comfortable in that life where every month I have an income and it pays my bills. I never have to stress about money. It's there. And so during that whole year and a half, I was basically working my 40 hours a week at that job, but I was also working probably at least 40 hours a week on photography as well. So many nights I had a Subaru Outback, and I would drive from Billings an hour and a half into the mountains on a Tuesday night, sleep in the mountains for the night, take some photos at sunrise, and drive back to Billings in the morning. That had become a very common thing for me to do. And my office kind of thought I was crazy because, it was, the office was, full of people that had families and kids and mortgages. And, here was this 23-year-old kid who would just drive out into the mountains at night, go climb a mountain in the morning, and then come back and go to work, throw a suit on, and act like nothing else happened. So that had become more and more and more common as I kind of started to go crazy in my own brain, and finally hit a point where I decided, all right, it's time.
This is episode 22 of the Ownstream podcast, featuring Andy Austin.
All right, welcome to the Ownstream podcast. We are delighted you are with us. I'm Stephen Shelley. I'm here with my lovely wife, Teresa Scoba. And this week's guest is Andy Austin, and Andy is just celebrating his first year anniversary living in a Dodge Sprinter van. Actually, it's probably correct. It's correct to call it a Dodge Sprinter, but it's really a Mercedes-Benz engine. Anyway, so Teresa and I, as you probably know, are about to embark upon our own little Sprinter van adventure. And Andy is really has a beautiful web presence on Instagram and his website, talking about his experiences. He's a very generous young man, gorgeous photographs, and a wonderful story about kind of how he got into that and what that experience has been like for him. If you can imagine the 6'5" former football player sitting in a little cubby hole doing social media for a company, that was kind of where he was before he realized, like, none of this is who I am. And he walked away from all of it, moved into a Sprinter van. And so we talk a lot about what it was like before, but mostly it's really about kind of what he's been doing since then, which has been really, really fascinating.
Yeah, I love how he talks about he's just a few years out of college, and how his life was, very scheduled, very structured for football. And then, he got a job after college, and, people were there who had families and mortgages and trajectories, but he was just there a very short amount of time before he realized that was not him, or not what he wanted, and freedom was calling. And he'd kind of had this vision of a van his whole life, and his friends and people who loved him were like, "It's time for the van, Andy," and it just reminded me as listening to him that we often have these dreams deferred, these dreams deferred, and many of us carry them with us for a very long time and sometimes never fulfill them at all. And I love how he just, he had this life where he was like going back and forth from the mountains. He's a photographer and shooting these beautiful photographs, then going back to the cubicle. And the contrast of that kind of opened him up to take a leap. And he did it. And now he's living in a van and not looking back.
And he said something more to the beginning of the interview, which you'll hear in just a moment, where he said he could easily see how anybody could allow the paycheck and the security to become their life. He could feel the pull of that. And I think before it got too strong, he extracted himself. Now, in my case, and I think in your case too, we allowed that to go on for a number more years.
Many more.
Many more. And it becomes harder and harder, though not impossible. It's never impossible. That's not what we're saying. But in his case, he could already feel that the strength of that mainstream, if you will, kind of work life pulling him, and it scared him. So hats off to him. He's a great example for taking a bold leap. You know, he left his job with some savings and then turned around and spent all of it on the van. So I don't think he had much money at that point. He's got this new movable dwelling that he's going to live in that he's never done before. And so I think hopefully what people will get, what you'll get from this is some inspiration to take a leap, go for it, jump, see what happens. And I think if, this is our 21st podcast episode, 22nd podcast episode, and everybody we've talked to thus far has more than landed on their feet. And I think that's a theme we want to promote as much as possible, because if you're sitting there and you're about to head into your job, or you're at your job, or you just left your job and you don't like it, there's a way out, and it may not necessarily be months or even years away. It could be even sooner if that's what calls to you. So Andy's awesome example, very eloquent for a young man, mature beyond his years, no doubt about it. Before we also get into the episode too, one thing we've been doing is kind of promoting ourselves a little bit after the episode, and I think we want to start doing that before. Not too much, but we do want to connect with you. We see that there are thousands of people downloading these episodes, in some cases tens of thousands, which is very exciting and really, really awesome. But many of you, we just don't know who you are, and we would love to know who you are. What is your story? Who are you? What are you about? Where are you from? What are you doing? And so we have a few places where you can connect with us. Facebook is a great place. We're facebook.com/Ownstream. Instagram, we post every day. Instagram.com/own_stream. Twitter, we're at Ownstream. And for sure on our website, you can subscribe to our mailing list. We send a weekly email every Monday with all kinds of cool techniques or examples, inspirations, tips about kind of venturing off the mainstream path and creating something you can call your own. So we really, really want to connect with you. Facebook's a great place so we can see your face, but whatever kind of modus operandi calls to you, we would love for you to connect with us, because we really, really want to build community around this. We're about to travel quite a bit in our van, so connecting with people on the road is something we really want to do. So we want to start promoting that from the standpoint of building community and really, really knowing who you are. So let us know. We would love to connect. All right, so on to Andy and his remarkable story about living in a Sprinter van and his life. It's a great, great conversation. We'll be back afterwards to wrap up. Please enjoy. Well, I guess I should start by saying we were put in touch with you via Derek Loudermilk, who was a podcast guest of ours, and I believe he probably interviewed you for his podcast.
Yes. I've been on his podcast many years ago, actually.
Oh, cool.
It's like in the early stages of Art of Adventure, I feel like, was when I was on it.
Oh, nice. And your adventure has taken some real, I guess, dramatic turns since.
Yes, he probably should re-interview me, because it's very different from when I was on his show last.
Yeah. Well, we obviously, I think the connection was formed over our mutual interest in living in a van, and he knew that we were in the purchase of a new new to us 2005 Sprinter 3500, and put us in touch with you, and so we've been kind of back and forth a little bit since, and certainly following your adventures on Instagram and gleaning tips here and there. So I think this podcast interview, we might ask some fairly specific questions, asking for a friend, of course, having nothing to do with anything we're thinking about. But anyway, thanks for being with us, Andy. It's great to chat with you.
Great to have you guys on my at my parents' house, where I spend about 5 days a year.
Well, speaking of your parents, were you born up in Alaska? Did I read that correctly?
I was born up in Anchorage, Alaska, but moved down to Montana when I was about 4. So I'm pretty much a Montanan by now.
Yes. Well, I'd love to hear. I think we're in terms of like framing up, because I do think at least what's interesting to us is probably the more recent nuance to your story, the van and the adventure guide stuff that you've done before that, and all the things you've done the last few years. But just for context purposes, why don't you talk a little bit about growing up, and if there were any kind of signs early on that you might kind of take an interesting direction with your life, and what has seemingly formed in the last handful of years for you.
Yeah, absolutely. So growing up, I kind of grew up in the adventure industry because my parents own an adventure travel company. They do multi-sport adventure vacations all around the world. And so I grew up in that industry. With that said, I grew up as the least adventurous person in my family. And so that was very interesting because I grew up playing football, and I grew up doing all those things and video games and of course, typical boy stuff. And I, of course, love to get dirty and scrape my knees and do other typical boy stuff. But the like hiking, cycling, outdoor scene, other than like skateboarding and rollerblading and, typical 90s boy stuff,
right,
was not my cup of tea as much as it was my family's. I did enjoy like the occasional hike or occasionally going snowboarding or something like that in the outdoor industry. And I enjoyed international travel. I liked going to different destinations or whatever around the world. But it wasn't my cup of tea nearly as much as my family. My family was all about it and gung-ho into it. And I was kind of more reserved compared to the rest. Now, compared to the average American citizen, I was probably 20 times more adventurous.
Right.
But compared to my family, I was pretty boring. So that love of the outdoors really started to kind of grow a little bit every year. And then when I was in college, I went to college at Montana State University over in Bozeman, about an hour and 45 minutes away from my hometown of Billings. I played football there. And while playing football there, I think I kind of discovered a love of the outdoors because it got me away from all the crazy hecticness that was my life. And so, you're doing 40 to 60 hours a week in football practices and games and all that kind of stuff, on top of having a full course load of work and school. So the little bit of time I'd get to go spend in the mountains was kind of like my break from all that. And then photography itself, when it kind of came along towards the end of my college career, my last 2 years in school, I think it helped to spark it more because I was kind of like, I want to go take pictures of mountains and things. And ended up going into that kind of like, let's go take pictures of mountains. And then I ended up just falling in love with the outdoors kind of all over again and into the mountains and that. And then, graduated college and no real life plan. And here I am now.
Right. And I'm just curious, like, were you on any sort of like football track coming out of college? Was that something beckoning to you or not?
No, not even close. I was so over football and done with football. Finished up. My body was fried. Like my knees didn't work, my back didn't work, my elbows didn't work, my wrist didn't work. So I was so over getting beat up every day that I was done with it. And to give you an idea of how little interest I have in football now, I didn't even watch a single game last year. I haven't watched a single sporting event in probably a year and a half now. So unless it's like just on at a bar when I'm sitting there having a drink, that's about as far as it goes.
That's interesting. And is that because you're just over sports, or you just don't like TV or distraction?
I think it's just because I'm over sports in general. I think part of that was when I was playing football, I realized the really weirdness that is sporting events. A lot of people that are playing football don't realize they kind of get wrapped up in it themselves because you are somebody and you're, famous because you're a football player or whatever. In the state of Montana, we have no pro sports teams, and Montana State and University of Montana are the two biggest things we have going on here. And so every Saturday, everybody's watching the games, and once a year when it's the Brawl of the Wild, the Grizz versus the Cats,
Right.
The whole state shuts down to watch that game. And where I kind of drew fault in it was I liked the competitiveness. I liked the team aspect. I loved my teammates, all of that. Where I didn't like it was how obsessed the fans were.
Yeah.
And how they lived vicariously through college kids.
Wow.
And I just, you had opponents who would do their research, find your Facebook page, find out who your parents were, who your sister was,
Yes.
what you did in your free time, and then they would just berate you over it while you're standing there, ready for the game. So,
Wow.
I think it was kind of in those moments that I realized that I like the idea of football, and I like that people can feel involved and they can, give something to root for, and it can bring a town together. It can do really cool things, but it can also be so detrimental. And I knew a lot of kids that I played football with who kind of graduated, and like their whole life was football. And my whole life was football up until that point. And so it was really weird to graduate and go from like being somebody to just being a normal, average, everyday citizen. And so, which of course I'm definitely not normal now. I've talked to friends of mine who like set records at Montana State, set nationwide records, and, the whole state knew their name and who they are and all that kind of stuff. So you go from being that to, selling insurance or selling houses or selling cars or working at a restaurant or whatever it is. And you go from being, walking around with their head held high in a town to, I'm like everybody else now. So, you kind of, that was the other weird part, is like, once you're done, you kind of just get cast aside. Like nobody really cares about you anymore. So there's a lot of weird things, with sports that I just kind of over it. And maybe someday, if I end up having kids someday or whatever, that, maybe I'll get back into sports or something. But as of right now, I'm very content with my mountains and my, outdoorsy side.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about what it was like after college and how you ended up where you are now. I know on your on your site you talk about you were in a normal life or something, quote unquote, right? And you just referenced it again. Yeah. So and then you cast that aside. So tell us a little bit about what that experience was like. What were you doing after college, and then what brought you up to the moment of deciding you were going to take off in the van?
Definitely. So it's been about 3.5 years since I graduated from college, and when I graduated, it was a very weird circumstance because I graduated. I finished playing football in November of 2013, and I graduated in December of 2013. And so all of a sudden, everything I had known for 12 years of my life, school and football, was over, and it was totally done. And I kind of just looked around like, okay, what do I do now? Like, nobody's telling me what to do. Nobody's telling me like, go stand over here, go to this, do that, And it was really weird. And so I sat there and was kind of just like, well, what do I do now? I have no plan. Graduated with a psychology degree. And I had my photography business already running for a couple of years at that point, but it wasn't really ready to be like my full-time job at all. I was not earning enough income from that to make it a real career. And so I just kind of went, and I just said, okay, I'm going to say yes to every opportunity that comes my way, which was one of the weirdest years of my life. So I just basically traveled for a year doing random everything from hitchhiking across Southern Africa to following the coffee and cigar route down northern Nicaragua, trekked up to the base of the towers in Patagonia. A lot of really cool stuff happened that year. I didn't really make any money, but I had a blast and I had a lot of fun. And that was the first year really where I had nothing holding me back, right? Because every other time, even in the summertime for football, you had to be there for workouts. You had to be there for conditioning practices and that kind of stuff. So this is the first time I really had nothing holding me back from just doing whatever I wanted to do. And that's when I discovered this is pretty awesome. And I loved the freedom. I loved just going and just doing, right? And so it was pretty amazing. And then I ended up guiding for my family's company for the full summer. I put a full summer of guiding in, worked, I think something like 64 days straight, took a week off, then worked 48 days straight. So made some money from that, which was good. And then I finally, towards the end of that year, I got a job. I got a real person job in an apartment. And through that whole year, I actually had an apartment with my girlfriend at the time. And in 9 months of having that apartment with her, I spent 10 nights there.
Oh, wow.
So, kind of foreshadowing what would happen after I quit my real job would be, I knew I didn't want an apartment if I did this again, because it was pointless to be spending tons of money on an apartment that I was never going to see. So I went and had my real job, which was it was a really good experience. It was doing social media and public relations for Southeast Montana tourism and Visit Billings. So where I'm from, I moved back to my hometown of Billings, and I was basically doing tourism promotion, social media, all that kind of stuff I was really good at. And I liked the job. I liked who I worked with. It was something I was really good at. But I was stuck in a closet there. I shared an office that was literally a closet converted into an office. And I shared it with my marketing director, and I had no windows. And I was just like, you took a person who just spent the last year spending more time outside than inside, and you locked them away in a place that has no windows. So from there, I basically decided, after about a year and a half of doing that, I couldn't do it anymore. I really couldn't. I was starting to go crazy. It was starting to really affect my mood, and my whole personality was changing. I could easily see how people could get comfortable in that life where every month I have an income and it pays my bills. I never have to stress about money. It's there. And so during that whole year and a half, I was basically working my 40 hours a week at that job, but I was also working probably at least 40 hours a week on photography as well. So many nights I had a Subaru Outback, and I would drive from Billings an hour and a half into the mountains on a Tuesday night, sleep in the mountains for the night, take some photos at sunrise, and drive back to Billings in the morning. That had become a very common thing for me to do. And my office kind of thought I was crazy because, it was, the office was, full of people that had families and kids and mortgages. And, here was this 23-year-old kid who would just drive out into the mountains at night, go climb a mountain in the morning, and then come back and go to work, throw a suit on, and act like nothing else happened. So that had become more and more and more common as I kind of started to go crazy in my own brain, and finally hit a point where I decided, all right, it's time. And that was just over a year ago, and just celebrated my year anniversary of quitting and just giving it all up. And once again, kind of quit with no real plan as to what I would do, and ended up guiding a good amount last summer for my family's company. This summer, I'm not actually going to be doing much guiding at all. I'm trying to not do much guiding, even though I love it and it's something I'm good at. Trying to do more photo gigs and make it work as a photographer and be in my van and kind of do what I love to do.
Well, I guess so. When people take the plunge away from when they leave a job, there are all these kind of weird little rules. They're not weird, but they're have 6 months of savings. Do you know what you're going to do next? And it kind of sounds to me like, I don't know about how much money you had saved or anything like that, but it sounds to me like none of that was necessarily true for you. And I can remember 8 or 9 years ago leaving a job, and some of that stuff was in place, some of it wasn't, but it was still a risk, and it was still a perceived risk rather. Although, there's another way of looking at risk, and so I wonder, like, when you were approaching the decision to give notice, because when you give notice, that's when it becomes official. All right, I'm definitely leaving. They know I've got 30 days left here or whatever it is.
Yep.
As you're approaching that decision, what's the psychology of that? What are you weighing there when you're kind of getting to the point where you're about to approach your boss and say, "Listen, I'm out of here in 30 days." What was going on inside for you then?
There's a lot of different emotions. Excitement. I actually gave 3 months notice, which was interesting.
Teresa just did.
I just did the same thing.
Yeah, and it was good because the whole thing was I knew I wanted to leave right at the beginning of summer. I left in April of last year, and I knew I didn't, wintertime for a freelance photographer is hard in this state. And so I wanted to make it through winter, save up every last penny I could before leaving. And so I basically knew I was going to leave right before summertime so I could just run in, guns a-blazing at summer as a photographer. And so I wanted to give my job proper notice, and I wanted to leave on really good terms. And that was what I was really worried about. I had a good relationship with my boss, had a good relationship with my office, and I wanted to leave on really good terms because I wanted to continue to actually work for them. Because as a photographer, my main clientele are departments of tourism. So that's who my major clients are. And so that's basically who I was working for. Was because I wanted to keep a good relation just so that I could basically sell them photos after I had left.
Right.
Like, hi, I left you guys, but I also need money from you still after I leave. So I wanted to leave on really good terms. So I'd email my boss and then, on the weekend, and I said, hey, I just wanted to come and chat with you about something on, Monday. Let me know what time works. And she gave me a time, and I walked into her office, and she looks at me and she goes, sit down, shut the door. And so I sit down, shut the door. And I just came out with it. I was really nervous. It's like, well, I decided that it's time for me to just go to chase my dreams and do what I love to do. And I looked up at her, because it's hard to look at her when I was saying stuff like that. And I looked up at her, and she had the biggest smile on her face. And she goes, well, Andy, we'll let you know, this is, we knew this day would come. Basically, when we hired you, we knew that we had somebody that was kind of above our limit of who we could get. And so we were just going to cherish the time we had with you while we had it. And then when you decided it was time to leave, we were going to let you leave. And so that was really relieving to hear. And it was great to get that kind of support. And it was just so nice to get that kind of love and support from people I'd spent a year and a half with. So, so then kind of the ball started rolling on what I'm going to do next. And it was good. So yeah, a lot of feelings, nervousness, happiness, excitement. I remember telling, I worked with my best friend. So she's the first person, she knew I was going to quit. And I walked over, to her and told her I'd done it, and she was super excited for me. So, it was a lot of things going on. And
I like, we talk a lot here, and Stephen and I talk a lot about the idea of contrast. And I like the picture of, you going up to the mountains and spending the night and waking up at sunrise and then booking it off to an office in your suit. You talked about, saying yes and chasing your dreams. And I'm curious about, what were you saying yes to? What was calling inside of you? And when you think about chasing your dreams and that moment and where it was kind of wide open, right? What was that for you? What was the dream? What was the yes calling?
I think the yes that was calling wasn't necessarily photography. It wasn't necessarily anything else. I think it was just a very simple word, and that's freedom. The other word that I would use to describe it was I was in search of happiness. I was in search of not being miserable. And so I was looking for just this feeling. It wasn't even a dream of photography. It wasn't a dream of being outdoors. It wasn't anything more than just living whatever life I wanted to live.
Yeah. So, yeah. And what I find interesting is that you came from a scholastic situation where you were not only in school, but you were also, in a big time sport where all of your time is probably structured, and you've gone from that just 3 years ago to something so completely open and free. I can't think of two more different ways of living in a day, honestly. And so at some point, it sounds like right after you quit your job and left your job, there was a little period of travel, and then the van comes into the picture. How did the van show up, and what was that all about? When did you start getting interested in a van?
I've probably been interested in getting a van since I was a child for some odd reason. I remember having a little toy model VW bus and just loving it. And that's what I wanted. I wanted a like a VW bus or a Westie or something, like nostalgia factor of that. And that was what I just dreamed of. And it was so weird because I dreamed of that when I was even not adventurous. And I don't know why that is. And I've tried to wrap my head around the fact that was a dream since I was a child. And so even when I was working my job, a lot of my friends, if I wasn't happy anymore working my job, a lot of them would have a very simple thing to tell me. They would always just say, get your van, go. It's time. Like, you just need to get your van and you need to go. So my last probably 6 months of working the job, I really started shopping hard. I'd toyed with the idea of shopping for a van for a long time. Nothing kind of came up, but it was just like, whatever, looking around. The last 6 months of it was like really shopping hard. Anytime a van would come up on Craigslist, I was going to look at it. Anytime a van was, parked on the side of the road, I'd go look at it. And then it was funny because I didn't get the van before I quit my job. And it took 2 months before I actually got the van. So I was kind of living out of my Subaru and, crashing with my sister when I had to, and just doing what I had to do to make it by until I could figure out what I was going to do. And then it happened to be that I just come off of a photo gig, and I was in Bozeman, Montana, and seeing some friends. And I actually had to be in the Tetons. I had to be in Jackson Hole, which is a 5-hour drive from Bozeman. I had to be in the Tetons by Monday night. And so on Saturday, I was just looking on Craigslist, just as I always did, and I see this beautiful Sprinter van. And I'm just like, that's perfect. And it was already built out. And so, which was perfect, because at that point I didn't have a place to build one out if I was going to.
Right.
Been tough to buy a shell and then be like, okay, I'm just going to be on the side of the road building out a Sprinter. So been very easy to do, no tools, no nothing, just trying to build a Sprinter on the side of the road. And I kind of had this vision of like what was going to happen in my mind was like, oh yeah, it's going to be this beautiful built out Sprinter. But what would have most likely happen is me throwing a bed in the back of the Sprinter and saying, I'll figure the rest out later.
That's right.
And then living like that for 8 months, so I didn't want to do that. So the Sprinter comes on Craigslist and it's beautiful. So, I emailed the guy right away because once these things go on Craigslist, they're gobbled up extremely fast. So I immediately get on Craigslist and I emailed the guy and I said, hey, is there any chance I can check it out before Monday afternoon? And he said, well, I'm free Monday morning if you can come. So first thing Monday morning, I go to his house, really nice guy, and he built it out and tells me all about it. And I'm just looking at it like, this is absolutely perfect. I had a small list of things in my mind of what I wanted my van to be and how I want it to be. And I just fell in love with it, reclaimed wood cabinetry and it had solar and it had a diesel furnace, which has been a lifesaver this winter and all that. And so I was sitting there and I was looking at it and going, well, I want a mechanic to check it out, of course, because, there can be a lot wrong with these diesel engines. And so I said, I want to have a mechanic check it out. He said, absolutely. I totally understand that and agree with that. However, just to let you know, there's a guy who has a mechanic scheduled to check it out this afternoon. So either you're going to have to try and get a mechanic to check it out before then, or you're going to have to hope that he doesn't want it. And then if you have a mechanic for later this week. So I was like, oh, it's not good. So it was in that moment that I had to make a very crazy decision in which, you were talking about saving up a bunch of money if you want to quit your job and all that stuff. Well, I had saved up a good chunk of change before quitting my job. But this Sprinter cost every last penny of that. And so I had to make a decision. Do I want to spend every last dollar I have on this van and hope that it works? Or do I just wait for the next one to come along? So I took it for a test drive. I'm driving it around. I called my dad. I'm like talking to him about it. And I said, this van is it just seems just perfect. And so he said, you know what? Sometimes you got to take a chance and you just got to go for it. So I came back and I said, I'll get you a check. So I went to the bank. He went to his bank. He got the title. I got a check. And by that afternoon, I was a van owner. And then I had to leave it there because I had to take my Subaru down to Jackson to go guide a trip. So I was like, I own this now. Thanks. Can I leave it here for like the next week? And he was totally cool about it. He was really awesome. He said, yeah, no problem at all. So I get it back to Billings a couple weeks later. And I have my mechanic go through the whole thing, check it all out. Mechanic comes back to me, and I'm, of course, extremely nervous that I have made a terrible choice. And he comes back and he says, well, it was low on coolant, and it needs new shocks and struts. Other than that, it's the cleanest diesel engine I've ever seen at 200,000 miles.
Oh,
so, nice.
Just felt like it just a huge sigh of relief that I'd not just blown every last dollar I had.
Yeah.
Wow, that's so cool. And it reminds me of our acquiring our Sprinter van story but very similar, sort of like not having a lot of luck, whatever. And then the perfect van appears on Craigslist, and it's a similar model to yours. And we went out and looked at it, and it was just like that. He had a guy flying in from somewhere he was just going to buy it on the spot, but we got in there right before he missed his flight, or he couldn't get a flight, or it was just something exactly like that. And for folks who aren't as familiar with this whole van life movement or the Sprinter vans specifically, I'm going to ask you more about that in a second. It's really competitive. It's like being on Ticketmaster trying to get Rolling Stones tickets. It's like refresh. So tell us, for people who aren't as familiar, Andy, tell us a little bit both about, what's great about a Sprinter? Like tell the listeners about like what is it like? Why is it great? And then also what you had it built out already. What was on that list of yours, and what was it like inside? Walk us through a bit.
Definitely. So like when you look at vans, kind of the research that I had done, there's a lot of different options you have out there. So you have like your classic Westie, the VW Westphalias that are gorgeous. And, for me as a photographer, I really wanted one because they would make great models, right? Mm-hmm. So I could photograph it. People would love it. It would give that whole van life vibe that people are just absolutely loving and eating up right now. And I actually had found a Westie, beautiful one. And it was Lamborghini orange. Excuse me. It was Lamborghini orange, and it was fully restored. The guy had done an amazing job on it, and it was beautiful. And he wanted $20,000 for it. Which is absurd for a 30-year-old vehicle. And I took it for a test drive, and I think I was on a flat road topping out at 45 miles an hour. And just kind of bouncing along the road and, no power, no acceleration, nothing. And then I asked him, what kind of gas mileage is this thing get? And he goes, about 10. I'm like, great. So while someday I'd still love to have a Westie, I think it's going to be for like a weekend vehicle, or, like someday when I do have a house or something like that, I'd still love to have one just for the cool factor of how awesome those things are and just how, iconic they are. But I knew for this particular vehicle, I couldn't make that work. I needed something reliable. I needed something with good gas mileage. I needed all of that. So the Westie was out on this circumstance. I couldn't do it to myself. I had a friend who lived in a Westie for 6 months, traveling around the world and around the country. And basically every other day she was in the shop with it, broken down. It was just a constant struggle with her. So I decided, I can't do that. So next up, there was your standard cargo van, your creepy, I'm going to abduct child, right. Cargo van. And I have another friend who lives in one of those. And I actually was really close to pulling the trigger on one of those before the Sprinter. But a lot of those are gas, which means they don't get as good a gas mileage. They have a tendency to be a little bit burlier than the Sprinters sometimes. Like you see them a lot more with like lifted and big tires on them, and some of them are 4-wheel drive, and they can be really cool. But the other thing is, kind of on my list of things that I wanted a place that I could hang out inside, and not just be a bed. As I discussed earlier, I'd lived kind of in my Subaru for a couple months, and every day I had to make up my bed, and there was no place to really hang out. in the Subaru, right? You know, you're kind of like, I have 3 hours to kill before a meeting or whatever, and I don't really want to go do anything else, and I don't want to go to a coffee shop. I just kind of want to hang out, maybe listen to some tunes, maybe read a book or watch some TV on my laptop or whatever. In the Subaru, that wasn't possible. And also kind of in those cargo vans, you can't stand up inside of them. They're a lot more cramped. They're not as much fun just to like hang out inside of. So for numerous reasons, the cargo van kind of wasn't my cup of tea. Then you have, you know, the conversion vans, the kind of the old man van, as I call them. And they're really like for your grandparents' van. I mean, they really are. Like they're cush leather seats. They have, you know, the captain's chair, and they have the, you know, and those are really more suited for like your weekend adventures and that kind of stuff, but they're really not for living out of.
Right.
And so in comes the Sprinter. The Sprinter is kind of the best of all worlds. It's not pretty by any means. I mean, I think my van is beautiful, but nobody else really does. So the thing with the Sprinters is most people can stand up inside of them. I can't because I'm 6'5". So I can't stand up in mine, but I can almost stand up in mine, which is nice.
That's cool.
I've gotten used to just crinking my head aside and standing up in there. But you know, these Sprinters most of the time are, I think almost all of them are diesel, which is really nice because, diesels, I mean, they're known to last forever. They're a little more expensive. Maintenance is a little more expensive, but they're really more bulletproof than the gas ones, and they're more fuel efficient. I get probably between 20 to 26 miles per gallon in mine.
Yeah.
And so that was one of the things on my list is I wanted something that was actually fuel efficient, because if I'm going to be driving this thing around even the state of Montana, which is where most of my gigs are in the state, Montana is massive. Today or by tomorrow, I'll be in Glacier, and that's 7 hours from here, still in the same state. So, I mean, Montana is a ridiculously massive state. So I needed something that was fuel efficient. So the Sprinters, for numerous reasons, they're just the kind of the perfect livable van. And the other thing that I really wanted too was I wanted something on my list. I wanted something that I could stealth park. And you know, boondock in the middle of cities and have nobody really notice that I'm living inside of this thing. And so the Sprinter is perfect. I mean, nobody knows I'm in that thing. I think I sleep more in bar and coffee shop parking lots than I do out in the woods most days.
Cool.
And it's just for a convenience factor. That's the thing about, like, everybody has this vision of van life that I'm constantly, you know, lugging this thing up into the mountains to sleep and to shoot and do all that kind of stuff. But honestly, I'm sleeping inside of cities a lot of times because that's where my friends are. We'll go out, have a beer or whatever. After the shoots are all done, we'll go have beers. And then I go crash at my friend's house, and they're like, oh, come hang out at my place. You can come crash here. I'm like, okay, cool. So I'll be inside, you know, drinking beer with them or whatever it is. And then I say, okay, I'm going to bed. Good night. And then I walk out into their driveway and go sleep. And they're like, but I have a couch. And I'm like, and I have a bed. Right. What's your point? And so I've yet to get the knock on the window like, hey, can't sleep here, which was huge for me, you know, because I thought about, you know, a pop top roof tent for a truck that I have, or my Subaru, or, you know, those kind of things. But you can't set those up in the middle of cities. People look at you funny for that.
So did you install windows in yours, or did it already come with some windows in there?
I have no windows, so I'm still kind of creepy. I might abduct your child van kind of look. I am going to install one window. I only want one, and I'm going to install it hopefully this summer at some point. And I'm going to install it on the passenger side sliding door.
Yeah. We've installed 3. We're installing 2 more. Since we're traveling with our daughter, who will be 15 months old when we hit the road approximately, we thought the boondocking thing's probably out of the question with her. She just doesn't play along and will cry here and there, and I don't think we can be undercover.
Right, for sure.
But before, I wanted to address one thing you said, just for people in case they're listening and wondering about, my God, 200,000 miles. That seems like a lot of miles. That's not a lot of miles for a diesel engine or a Sprinter. You know, you see people out there buying, 200, 300,000. You could go to Craigslist right now, I'm sure we could, and pull up all kinds of listings at 280, 320, 340, and up. So that's not a lot of miles. You've got a ways to go on that.
Yep. No, for sure. I have and that was the nice thing is, so the guy that I bought it from, here's the shocker. In the 3 years that he owned it, he only put 15,000 miles on it.
Wow.
Yeah.
I put 30,000 on mine in less than a year. So, he barely touched it. And then, so before he had it, it was actually a prisoner transport vehicle.
Oh, man.
That was the past of my van. It was a prisoner transport, which is pretty funny. So, it's in good shape, and it's got a lot of life left in it. Hopefully, fingers crossed.
And you call it Nemo, or did it come with its own name?
No, Nemo is the name that I gave it. I had given it numerous names before I came to Nemo, and I really liked Nemo.
Yeah, it's cool. Yeah, it's cool.
Is it after the cartoon Nemo?
It's actually it's actually not. And the real reason will actually you'll watch Finding Nemo and you'll never think of it the same way again. Because Nemo is actually Latin. The word is Latin and it means no one. Mm-hmm. So, which it's kind of funny. So the cartoon is literally called Finding No One. And you can create your own conspiracy theories on that. There's a lot on the internet about why that is.
Oh, interesting.
And so I named my van No One, basically, because in my philosophical brain, the way I look at nature looks at us, and it doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter where you're from, what your background is, what your race or gender, or anything of that sort is. We are all no one. We're all the same. And so kind of being a van of nature and van of heading out into the woods, I kind of decided to name it after that.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, that's nice. I got a few specific questions. What's your power system in there? You running fully on solar? Was there a battery system installed when you got it?
Yep. So I had there's two deep cycle batteries that were in there when I got it. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, I had to replace both of them this year because they were both fried for some odd reason. But there's two deep cycle batteries, and they're charged one of three ways. One is off of the solar panel I have on my roof. And then the other way is they're hooked up via an isolator to my alternator. Yep. So if I'm driving around a bunch, charges off that. And then there's a third. There's a plug-in that I can plug the van in and get power that way.
Yep, that's a good system.
How much power in your batteries? I won't get too more specific than this, but we're curious.
Off of those bad boys.
I cannot remember the numbers right now. Yeah. It's a good amount. Unfortunately, the problem I have right now is I'm running a dorm fridge, which is like the worst thing I could be running. Because dorm fridges are not meant to be running on deep cycle batteries. Mm-hmm. And so that's my main source of draining power right now is my dorm fridge. So at some point I'm hoping to get a nice internal compressor fridge of that sort. And that will make my life a whole lot better. But like in the wintertime, in the summer, it's been nice. 2 nights ago, my battery, my inverter faulted and tripped. Now that's the first time in 3 weeks that's faulted. So it just got to low enough power that it shut itself off. Mm-hmm. And that was actually crazy because I haven't really been driving around much for 3 weeks. And I've been pretty stagnant. So to me, that tells me my solar is doing a great job of keeping my batteries up and running. Mm-hmm. And so and I think the only reason I tripped is because that particular day I hadn't really driven much, and also it was a stormy, cloudy day. So didn't really get much solar, didn't really get much anything else. But in the wintertime, it was a struggle to keep my batteries from tripping. And I have to come to the conclusion before next winter what I'm going to do to solve that, whether it's going to be adding 2 more batteries or adding another panel or both of those things.
How many panels do you have now?
Just one panel up there right now.
Yeah. I guess if you drive a lot, you're going to pull a lot of power off the drive shaft itself.
Yep. I know I pull quite a bit of that, and it's a big panel. It's about the 100-watt panels. So it's a good sized panel. I'd like to put one more up there with that. I think it would save me a lot of grief. So I don't know what the answer is going to be yet, because my furnace, that was keeping me alive last winter, and I need that to not trip.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, we're specifically curious because we're in the process of designing our electrical system. And for those of you who are not at all familiar with this, with vans or building out vans, like one of the things that was appealing to us, at least, was learning about, how our living space works, because at home we know nothing about electricity or how to put together a system. And
we bought this place, it was already here.
Yeah, this whole balance of, how much power do I need to run what I need to live, is such a huge part, right, of the design of the van. But it's just something we don't think about on a daily basis when we're living in an apartment or a house, or at least most of us. Some people have designed their own house. But I'm curious about, more about your living space, thinking about that, your power needs, et cetera, but just like what the layout's like and how that's what, how you've liked that and anything you've changed.
Yeah, totally. And it is funny that you talk about that, because it is something you don't think about. And it's even something because the one downside of the fact that I didn't build out my van is I don't know where a lot of stuff is sometimes. I'm like, okay, I need to find the fuse for this, and I don't have a clue where it even is. So that's why I'm wiring in my fan right now, and he built false walls. He did such a good job concealing wires and doing all that kind of stuff that I can't even find wires. I'm trying to tap into the fuse box, and I can't even find out how to get to the fuse box. I know where my fuse box is, but I can't even get to the back of it because he built a false wall on top of it, and I can't even find a screw to let the false wall out. So he did such a concealed job of wiring and doing he did an amazing job to it. He did such a good job that I can't find some things. That's one downside that I'm running into is when I want to add things and build things on, I don't have a way to figure it out. So it can be kind of a challenge sometimes to okay, I think here's that and this and that. So I don't know. But you don't think about it, and even I don't think about it because mine came pre-built. So my living space, I love it. I love how it's built right now. He's got a bed in there. As I said, I'm 6'5". I do hang off the bed. It's a little short for me, but I've just gotten used to that. I could, if I wanted to, add on to it, but I just don't. I'm fine with it. And it's about the size of a twin bed. So it's not a big bed at all, width-wise. And I many nights sharing it with whoever decided to come along for the journey with me. So it's a little tight in there sometimes, but it works. Usually it's my model sharing the bed with me, so I don't mind too much, But the other than that, it's all really beautifully done. I have a really nice stovetop and a sink. I don't ever really use my sink because that is one thing I would like to change if I was to redo it all, or I might end up just building something into it. Is the water is really hard to refill for the tank because it's a big, one of those canisters you get at Walmart, the big 7-gallon ones. And it's actually really hard to get out, and get back in again. Mm-hmm. And so I've kind of come to the point where I don't ever refill it anymore. It's got a water pump, it's got all that, and I don't really ever use it. Instead, I have a big 7-gallon water jug that I keep next to my door, my sliding door. And I pretty much just use that for everything. So that's my drinking water, that's my brush teeth water, that's my dishwater, that's all of that.
Mm-hmm. And do you refill, how do you travel with a jug like that? Do you have to tuck it away somewhere, or is it secured?
No, it just kind of flies around the back of the van. it has a tendency to kind of just to go flying, but it's fine. Like it doesn't. I have a very small living room, so it stays in the living room.
Yeah.
So it doesn't really go too far. Usually, what ends up happening is it's leaning against the door, and so whenever I open my sliding door, I just have to catch it because it's usually going to fly out.
Wow,
So it's pretty funny whenever people that don't know my van open that door because it usually just falls on top of them.
And do you have any sort of bathroom or shower hookup in the van itself, or are you using facilities,
just the woods,
etc.? The woods,
lakes and streams, and yeah,
those
just go. Showers are usually it's going to be really nice heading into summer again because I can go back to showering in lakes and streams. But I think one of the coolest things that I did, which I would recommend to any van dweller, would be I have a gym membership to Anytime Fitness, which has a lot of locations across the West. And you can find out whichever gym works for you. But I used that because there's like those gyms are all across Montana, Utah, Idaho, like all these places. And so if I need to get a shower in, I just go to my gym. And then I can get a workout in and I can get a shower in. And they're 24 hours a day. And it's actually a pretty good deal.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, we know a lot of people who use Planet Fitness too. This is they're all over the place, and it's pretty cheap membership, and they have nice showers.
Yep, and a month or something. We don't have one. We have one in Montana. It's somewhere I don't go ever, so that's
right, not useful.
off the radar for me.
So. Tell us a bit about so you've been doing this about a year about a year, right? Tell us some of the more, some of the amazing experiences you've had, places you've woken up and been awestruck or, or just, some amazing experiences of living in a van. Tell us a couple things.
Yeah, I've seen more Walmart parking lots than I've ever wanted to see in my entire life.
I saw one on your website, though, with a beautiful view of the mountains.
Yeah. The Bozeman Walmart has like one of the most scenic views of any Walmart I've ever been to.
That's great.
Salt Lake Walmart's actually pretty nice too. So like you can definitely make it work. But no, I mean, it's kind of funny because everybody, they say, oh, you live in a van, like you must go to some really amazing places. And I have been some pretty amazing places, but I would say 75% of my time is spent in Montana. And as a freelance travel photographer, most of my clients are in Montana. And so if I'm trying to make money, I need to be here. Mm-hmm. And the thing about that, though, is Montana is massive. And as we were talking about earlier, I mean, you can drive 13 hours, still be in the state. So I spend most of my time split between kind of three general areas of Montana. The Flathead area, which is up in the north where Glacier National Park is, one of my favorite areas. Mm-hmm. Central Montana, which is kind of Bozeman area, and mountains of that area, which is kind of where I went to school. And then Eastern Montana, which is Billings and where my family is and where I'm from. So a good chunk of my time is split up between those three places, which has made van life really nice because I have a home wherever I go, and then I have a lot of friends in every one of the towns that I go visit. And, I can have a crew of 10 photographers and adventurers ready to do some crazy stuff in front of a camera whenever I need it. So that part's really nice to have. And then I've done some pretty cool stuff. Like, for instance, I did for New Year's, I went to Switzerland and Italy. And so it was $1,500 round trip to fly out of Montana to Amsterdam. And it was $400 to fly out of Seattle. So I just drove to Seattle. Nice. It cost me about $100 in diesel each way. I just drove over to Seattle and then flew out and then drove and then actually spent a week out there. I have some friends in Seattle, so spent a little time out there and then drove back a week later. So that was really nice to be able to do that. And then when the weather got really cold, we had a pretty cold winter this year. The weather got really, really cold, and I went south for a good solid month. In Utah and Arizona, California, Nevada, all those places. So that was a lot of fun. I have some friends that kind of came down, kind of doing these things. I call them van trips, which is just like a friend comes with me. We do a week. So a lot of my friends have real jobs, so they might get a week off from their real job. They'll call me up and say, hey, I want to do a van trip. And I say, perfect. Where are we going? And so they'll fly to wherever I am or meet me somewhere, and then we'll hop in the van and go somewhere for a week. So I got to do a couple of really fun van trips where my really good friend Brooke from up in Canada, she flew down to Salt Lake City. She joined me there. We went down to, kind of did the full circuit down there, Zion, Bryce, Horseshoe Bend, down to the Grand Canyon, down to Sedona, and then back again. So we did that one. And then I went over, spent a couple days in Salt Lake area, got my van worked on a bit, drove down to Vegas. Another friend of mine from Montana flew to Vegas, where she hopped in the van. And we went over to Alabama Hills in California, where Mount Whitney is. And then, we went through Death Valley and then kind of came back up through Valley of Fire and did that route. So, and then I actually, cause she's from Montana, I drove back up with her to Montana cause it was time kind of for me to come home.
And are there places that you've seen in Montana or on any of your trips that are like off the beaten path? I think one thing that we're there's all these patterns that people go by in life, whether it's their daily life, where they, how they go to work and where they eat lunch. Like I had a job years ago where I sat in the same chair and I ate the same lunch every day for weeks and weeks and weeks. And I think it kind of expands out in concentric circles from there. And, there's all these beautiful national parks, which people should go to. But I think somebody like yourself and something that we're interested in exploring are lesser known places that people might not be flocking to this summer, but that still might be worth checking out and visiting. Does anything come to mind that you've seen in the last year that people, oh my God, you've got to go to the Alabama Hills, for example, or anything else?
Well, Alabama Hills for sure. That is one that absolutely blew my mind.
I gotta be honest with you, I had never heard of that until you posted it on Instagram. Like, this is right up, this is like not even a day's drive for us in Southern California.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the coolest places I've ever been. And I was only there for one night, but I can tell you I'm absolutely going to be back to visit that again. The other place that I always talk about, and then you see a recurring theme in my Instagram, is a place called Bighorn Canyon, which is actually here in Montana, kind of on the Montana-Wyoming border. And it's a 71-mile-long canyon, and it is one of the most scenic things you'll ever see. And nobody's there. I mean, I pretty much get the whole canyon to myself every single time I'm there. So that's one that I just absolutely love. And then, I mean, you can't go wrong anywhere in Montana in general. And whether it's the national parks or the national forests, pretty much the whole state is insane. I mean, I can make a living just traveling around and not see the same place twice.
So, being a year in now, tell us, after 1 year in, what are some of the big lessons you've learned from living in a van, from taking this path, and any way that you'd say you've been changed by the experience? Yeah,
I think, something that I've told myself, and I have it printed out, typed up and printed out in my van, is trust and enjoy the process. And that is something that I've kind of looked at every single day and reminded myself, because not every day is good and not every day is perfect. But it's a process of what's going on and what I'm working towards. But it's a hard thing, because there are days in the van that are not fun. There are days where things break. There are days where it's lonely, which won't be as much of a problem for you guys as it is for me. But there's definitely the days where I'm just rolling into a campground and I'm the only person in the campground, and it's just like, okay, do I even have a campfire tonight? Because it's just me. Mm-hmm. And so it's a process, and you have to accept the good with the bad, and appreciate that I get to live a life that most people only dream of. And I have to remind myself that all the time, because it's easy to want to complain and freak out when things go wrong, and you want to beat your head against the wall. But it's important to just remind yourself that you're living the dream and you're living what you set out to do, and nothing can actually stop you from living that.
Yeah, nobody's imposing anything on you, except for
right.
Maybe the van itself a little bit here and there, and the roads,
sure.
But that's basically it. One thing I'm kind of a creature of habit, and one thing that I've done when I've traveled a lot is I will create routines, good ones, that help me kind of get grounded and settled and kind of secure. Particularly in the early part of the day, I have like a morning kind of spiritual routine or practice that I do. I'm curious if you've, since so much of your life is about freedom, if you find yourself imposing certain routines or practices on your day that kind of help you also feel grounded, since you're living in such an unconventional way.
Not really. I mean, other than my morning cup of coffee, I don't have much of a routine, and I kind of enjoy that. Mm-hmm. My morning cup of coffee is my only one ritual that I have to have.
Photographed very beautifully, by the way, often, which is exciting for me. I love coffee as well.
Well, it was funny because I was telling a friend the other day, why I pretty much always shoot and post my morning cup of coffee. And it's usually just an iPhone photo or whatever. And I just post it to Facebook. I don't even post it to my Instagram. I just post it to Facebook. And there's a few reasons why I do that. And one, I love coffee in general. I mean, it's such an amazing fluid of life. And I need it to survive. I have actually not had a cup of coffee today yet, and I think I might die here soon.
Wow. You're doing good with no coffee.
I know. I'm starting to struggle. I think I'm starting to fade. But so one of the cool things I love about my morning cup of coffee and why I like to photograph it is because whenever I'm having my cup of coffee, I think about the fact that there are so many people around this world who are also enjoying their morning cup of coffee. And all of these other people are probably enjoying it in a much different way, whether it's, dad reading the morning newspaper while kids are screaming and running around the house while he's trying to enjoy his morning cup of coffee, or people, at the stock market, like people are screaming and they're trying to drink their coffee really quick so they can wake up and be doing that, or people sitting in a cubicle drinking their morning cup of coffee or whatever it is. Everyone for the most part is around the world drinking their morning cup of coffee. And so I like to think of it as kind of my view into the world is it reminds me and it grounds me as to what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. Because I'm fortunate enough to wake up and have my coffee in places that people spend their whole year just saving up to visit. There are these families that are saving up for a year just to go visit Glacier National Park, and I visit it once a month at least, or whatever. And I'm just, this is my life. This is where I get to sit and have my morning coffee in the morning and have it. So one thing I love about my coffee is it just grounds me. It gives me a lot of time to think and just observe and just imagine what every other person in the world is going through right now. So I love that. And then the other thing that I love, and something that I've been trying to do a lot more lately, is, my whole goal with this photography thing is to inspire people to do it themselves. I want people to see my photos and just say, hey, I want to do that. I don't, maybe it's not necessarily that place, but I want to have this lifestyle. I want to travel. And, I think that travel can make people wise, and it can really improve people's lives to a great extent. And so I think that I want everybody to travel. I want everybody to experience these things. I want everybody to do this. And so one of my methods of inspiring people to travel is to show somebody what I'm doing right now. And I do that using my cup of coffee. And so while I'm having my morning cup of coffee, if I take a photo of it and just say, oh, good morning from, wherever, or just good morning, people are looking at that, and they're looking at their own lives for a second. And maybe they're in their house or they're in their cubicle or whatever. And it triggers something in their brain that thinks, okay, I'm doing this, and that's Andy's life right now. That's what Andy's doing. And so my whole goal and hope is that that's going to inspire them to, get out and do their own thing and to find their own, morning cup of coffee. But I hope that it triggers something in their brain to say, oh, wow, that could be me right now.
It's so accessible. Like, it's such a routine that we all share, but the way in which we may be sitting or where we are having that cup of coffee may be so different. And I love that. It's such an accessible point for somebody to look through your eyes and say, wow, my life could be so different at this moment. So it's so good. It's so good. So I know that we've almost run out of time with you, Andy. So we have 3 questions we ask at the end of every podcast. So we'll just run through those quickly now before we wrap up.
Right.
The first is, what book or books, up to 3, would you recommend every human being should read?
Oh, man. Put me on the spot. Well, currently I'm reading Desert Solitaire, which cool. I would highly recommend. And that's Edward Abbey, and it's kind of his experience living in Moab and living in the desert. And that is just such an amazing book and his kind of viewpoint on life. Highly recommend that one. The other one that I'd recommend, well, I'll say 2 more. Okay. One more would be Pursuit of Happiness by Dalai Lama. That one is, Art of Happiness, not Pursuit of Happiness. That's a Will Smith movie.
Right.
The Art of Happiness by the Dalai Lama. And that's just a fantastic kind of way to look at life and to figure out what makes you happy. And it helps in a lot of decision-making processes of like, what can you make, what can you do to make yourself more happy, or what decision, you're faced with a hard decision in your life. It's really a good book to kind of help you decide which one of these will actually make me happy and which one will make me think I'm happy, So that's another fantastic book. And I think third would be probably my favorite book of all time, and it's going to be super cliche, and you're going to hate me for it. And it's going to be Into the Wild.
Yeah, that's great.
Classic. And that one has been my favorite book since the first time I read it, and probably helped to inspire me to just go and just to be and just to do.
Yeah. Yeah, I have one of my favorite channels on Pandora is the Eddie Vedder channel, primarily because all the music from the film is on that channel. The music is so amazing. Teresa hasn't seen the movie.
Oh my gosh! Well, the whole thing is it's my favorite. It's my favorite book. It's my favorite movie, and it's my favorite album. Not even soundtrack, but favorite album of all time is that Eddie album. It's the one album that I can listen to nonstop, whatever I'm doing, any mood I'm in, and still absolutely love it every time.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome. Second question, particularly interested in this one from you, given the certain minimizing you had to do upon moving into a van, but is, what item or thing have you had or owned the longest, and why?
Oh, man. I'm trying to think of what's in the van. Why it's in there.
Right.
What have I owned the longest and why? It's a tough question. Because like everything in the van is so simple. Mm-hmm. Like there's nothing in there that's like out of, oh man, I'm trying to think of what's in there. There's some leather journals that are in that van that are pretty old that I've had for a long, long time. With just thoughts over the years. And I think one of them that's in there is one of my older leather journals, and it's been with me through many phases of life. And so there's random writings and poetry and whatever that's in there. And every once in a while I go just to see how far I've come, and just in life, because every different one kind of represents a different chapter in my life, and different struggles or different triumphs. And so I think that reading those over again kind of remind me of how far I've come and what I'm doing now and why I'm doing it. So I think that's probably one of the most important things that's in my van.
Great. Third question. Was there something else?
Second most important thing in the van that's not that old, but is highly important, is probably my gold sequin tuxedo jacket. And that is one of the most used things in my van. It is just brilliantly gold sequin. It's custom tailored to me, of course, and it comes with a gold sequin bow tie as well. And when you feel like being fancy and you just downtown Montana in a gold sequin jacket, and you're 6'5" and a former college football player, and you stand out anyway.
Right.
It's a good time, and it's going to be a good time.
It's awesome.
Want a photo.
Don't worry.
Third question. What have you learned in the last 30 days that you think every person should know?
Ooh, I would say, and this is so relevant to what's going on in the world right now, is really to kind of hold judgment and hold thoughts and ideas about a person or a group of people until you meet them. Because I just spent a month in the country of Jordan in the Middle East. And without a doubt, the kindest, most generous, most amazing people I've ever met. And we as Americans have these very terrible ideas of the Middle East. And we have these very bad thoughts about like, oh, it's they hate us over there, and it's the Middle East, and it's, you know, they're Muslim countries, and they're whatever, whatever it might be. And I went into it with a very open mind, but even me, as a very open-minded person, still had some reservations about going into the Middle East, during this time of our lives, and it blew my mind. I've never felt safer. I don't think I've ever been to a safer country, including the United States, where, every person there was just very generous and kind and would give you the shirt off their back if you asked for it. Every person would invite you in for tea, and they might even speak English and you don't speak Arabic, but they would want you to sit there and enjoy tea with them. So I think in the last 30 days, it's probably one of the most important lessons that even I had to learn was, that I think people in general are inherently good, and that evil and kind of negativity are a minority. But unfortunately, that minority screams so loud that we forget that.
Yeah, I think one of the many, many benefits of travel, and there's so many of, breaking habit and learning new things and exploring new parts of who you are is challenging the kind of program of thought that might come from one place. And I think that's so important.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely.
Well, Andy, that's a perfect note to wrap up on. This has been great. I really, really appreciate your time. For us as imminent van dwellers, this is particularly helpful to talk to you and hear that you're alive and well.
I haven't resorted to eating ramen for every meal yet, just at least like 2 of them. So, Sweet.
Well, listen, thanks a lot. This has been terrific.
Thanks for having me. It's been a wonderful experience. I'm grateful to be on it.
All right, that's it for this week's Ownstream podcast. Thanks so much for tuning in. We hope you enjoyed this very special interview with Andy Austin. Please be sure to check out the show notes for this episode for links to everything about Andy, including his website, his beautiful social media channels, the books he recommended, and more. All of that can be found at ownstream.co/Andy Austin. That's ownstream.co/ANDYAUSTIN.
Also, before we let you go, please sign up for our weekly tip-off email at ownstream.co and just click the sign up button in the upper right-hand corner. This is where we share each Monday 3 cool things we've learned in the last week in the areas of lifestyle, business, and spirit. This could be an amazing quote, individual tip, or tool designed to bring you more freedom and power in your life. So definitely sign up for that again at ownstream.co and just click sign up.
Finally, we have a Facebook page. Please like us at facebook.com/Ownstream and be the first to know about new podcast episodes, new blog content, and cool stuff related to our personal journey. Also, we're on Twitter at Ownstream and on Instagram, where we post regularly at own_stream. Thanks so much. We'll talk to you next week. Thanks for listening to the Ownstream podcast. To learn more and connect with us, please visit ownstream.co or follow us on Twitter at Ownstream and Instagram at own_stream.